Mm-hmm. And it triggers your brain. The more you do that, then it triggers you to realize what you're doing. Because what a lot of people will say is, oh, it takes me about a half an hour, 40 minutes just to get into the groove.
Yeah,
And
right.
I said, that's just because you're not trained. You haven't trained yourself. Like the 30 or 40 minutes of dinking around with Facebook or doing whatever else um, kind of needs to be shortened just because we
Yeah.
don't really have the luxury of so much time now. We have to be able to go in and out of our creative work as smoothly as possible. And it will be different for everybody, but a couple of other rituals are music, playing a certain kind of soundtrack for your creative
Hmm.
work, movement, any kind of stretching or dancing or yoga, Tai Chi, anything that brings you into and out of your creative space with your own style and grace.
Love that. Hey, just so you know, we have a couple people asking if our friend Cynthia could be a little bit louder. Is there any chance you could be a little bit louder? Like
Yes,
this, like this.
how much louder?
Oh, that's
How much
perfect.
louder?
Oh, that's
How
great.
much
You're talking
louder?
through your, but yeah, like a little bit closer is awesome. You don't have to do one of these, but um, yeah, the idea of transitions is so huge because at first you said, this idea of ripping yourself away once you're in the creative act. I mean, I think that is most people's problem. I mean, certainly it's been my own when I'm toggling between creating training for work, creating music, to creating graphics for this show or whatever it may be. I have to allow myself the time to get in that mode. And once I'm in that mode, it's a disservice to the project and myself to just tear myself away. And I think that most people use the transition as the easiest escape hatch. Like, oh, I'm not feeling it today. I know as a young musician, I was one of those idiots that'd be like, I got to get in the mode, of songwriting and, like, drink yourself stupid and whatever, wait for the muse to show up. And, it's just such bullshit. I read these books on, great songwriters. Paul Simon's probably one of my favorites, where he'll wrestle a song into submission over the course of 4 years, but the dude has a ritual. He goes to an office. He has his cues. He has everything that supports him, and I think his body of work shows that. Do you read a lot of books, Cynthia, on people doing the creative process, like breaking down the creative process and stuff, or?
Not so much anymore. And I remember there was a point when I couldn't read any more books about writing. I had read so many books
Yeah.
about writing, and
Yep.
then I just couldn't take it anymore. But I do read some about the creative process. I read a couple of Stephen Pressfield's books recently,
Hmm.
um,
Do the work.
and yeah, Turning Pro and Do the
Yep.
Work. Um, I do a little bit, but often, I mean, it's kind of like um, mostly to validate what I know and experience with my clients.
Yeah.
Not that I'm so expert that I know everything about the creative process, but right now I'm more interested in reading more specifically about my art form and studying the art that
Like
I'm studying.
the different mediums and stuff. Sure, sure. I think one of the good points that comes from that is that, I always have to be really mindful when I'm in hyper creation mode. I can't be in consumption mode at the same time as creation mode. Those two things work against each other. So I stopped reading books. I stopped watching TV years ago now, but I can't expect myself to all the influence you want to get from somebody, you've probably been accumulating it for years. You don't need to like pick up the book that minute and be like, okay, what am I going to plagiarize? I see a lot of people I see a lot of people starting and stopping because they're trying to consume all this stuff at the same time they're trying to create, and they're wondering why they're blocked, or they're wondering why it's kind of a start-stop with them. Um, it's a good
Well,
point.
what happens is people consume that, we consume those things, and then we think that's some kind of dictate as to how it
Yeah,
should be. And then we
right.
try to do that, and we fail, and then we make ourselves wrong instead of saying, well, that's just kind of prescriptive advice that doesn't take into account me, my motivation, my circumstances, my constraints, my project. So that's why I like the kind of coaching that I do. It's really about developing my clients' own original impulse, their own authenticity, and
Hmm.
what's true for them, both in who they are and how they operate, so that they can release what is true to them, what their creative expression is, their message or their voice. So it makes sense to me that if you're just trying a one-size-fits-all approach, it, it's a little bit, it's two things. It can be damaging because you make yourself wrong around it. And then sometimes people will just, it's like armchair creating. They'll
Yeah.
just read all those books about writing and creating and won't do the work.
You're right, right. At some point, you got to put the book down and write your own, right? Or put the music down and
Yes.
create your own. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember there was this guy named Elliot Sobel, and he wrote a book called Wild Heart Dancing. And it's just a cute little book, and in it he said, stop reading the self-help books. Like, stop trying to fix yourself. The best way to fix yourself is to enjoy yourself and love what you
Yeah.
love.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
thought, that is the best advice. So if you're paying attention to your influences, if you pay attention to what lights you up, pay attention to what fuels your vitality, chances are you're going to be steering yourself in the right direction to make things happen.
That's a great point because one of our readers, Duncan, just asked about, and I'm sure this is a common one you hear when people struggle to find their own voice. I could speak to it a little bit from a singing perspective, literally finding my own voice. The first reviews of my band when I moved out to Los Angeles, this is my first time singing in the band versus just playing bass, they were scathing. They said my voice was like nails on a chalkboard. It was terrible. And it kind of fucked me up a little bit for a minute. But I doubled down. I went and took singing lessons. I started paying attention to all my influences, Neil Diamond, Elvis Costello, all these people that had weird-ass voices too, basically. And I cultivated over a period of time. But what do you usually recommend to people who are struggling to find, if they're always wondering in the back of their head, am I being unique? Am I being original? What do you tell them?
Is this with writing?
Yeah, with writing in general.
Yeah, I really like the free writing method where you write without stopping. You kind of give yourself a prompt,
Yeah.
and then you set the timer for 10 or 15 minutes and just let rip. And this method has worked for me to write everything I've written, and I teach
Wow.
this in my Free Write Fling classroom, online class. And a prompt that really works for finding your true voice is, what I really want to say is, and
Yeah.
then just go and really give yourself permission to write as if no one's ever going to read it. I think that's a big one. Even if you're writing a blog post, just say, I'm just going to write a draft. I'm just going to let rip. Like, this is what I really want to say. Because that is, the honest stuff is so interesting. That's the stuff we like to read. I just got
Yeah.
one of my clients' books in the mail, and I started reading it last night. I was so excited, and I got engrossed. I loved it. And she said something really straightforward and honest right away. And I just was so grateful for her courage. And so it's not easy to find your voice. It's not easy to shut out fears about what people will think. So Duncan, if you're having a hard time with that, it's not that you're lame or a loser. I think it takes practice. And the more you do it, and often you have to kind of first put a little cone of silence around you where you don't have to worry about the
Yeah.
audience. And then I find that the stuff that I'm most afraid to hit send on, that feels the most honest
Yeah.
and most
Right.
me,
Yeah.
is always the best stuff. Always the
Yeah.
stuff that people say, wow, that was great. So
Yeah, when I remember when I had the whole manifesto locked and loaded and I was gonna hit the send to announce it, it's one of those like, too much vulnerability. It's like you're standing there naked in front of all your colleagues kind of thing.
terrifying.
Yeah, but one of the things
Terrifying. It
that
really is.
I gotta pull out of what you said is this idea of volume, like regimented volumes of words and stuff. Chris Guillebeau is a very successful writer, speaker, author, all of the above because he writes 1,000 words per day. Not everybody needs to stick to that regimen. I interviewed Ani DeFranco and asked her as a huge fan. I asked her a lot about her creative process, and buried in that interview somewhere, she just said, it's an easy job and anyone can do it. Speaking your truth. Because if you speak your truth enough over the course of how many ever years, how many thousands of songs, and all, she's like, you never got to go, it's like kind of that idea of lying. You never got to wonder if you were full of shit, because you're speaking your truth. So it sounds kind of trite to say, get in the habit of speaking your truth. But I've noticed that with myself. The more I'm able to do that, the more my voice tends to emerge.
Yeah, I love Ani DeFranco, and she has that song that I think it's called "Shut Up and Sing," and
Yeah.
she says, "People always tell me how great I am and how wonderful it is that I'm standing up and taking the hit. And she said, just
Yeah.
do it yourself. Shut up and sing. And
Yeah, right.
another point I want to make is it's the same thing as your body and your health. If you're putting good fuel in, you're going to get good energy out. It's the same with your creativity. You've got to be really mindful of what you're consuming and how
Yeah.
much you're consuming.
Right.
And if you're having problems with your creativity, with your output, take a look at how much you're consuming. I think there's an inverse proportion of how much we consume versus how much we create.
I think that ties back to one of the big concepts I have, which is this relationship between space in your life and the mission to carry it out. You can't create a brilliant painting on a cluttered canvas that's already full. So this idea of creating space in your mind, in your life, the sanctuary of the physical space, all these things, it starts with that, and I think hitting pause on all the consumption is a big thing, and we're kind of conditioning ourselves to be addicts. I mean, it's available everywhere now. That keeps coming up.
Well, and that was one of the things I wanted to say about rituals and transitions is that it's just like, stop. If you're overwhelmed or confused at any moment, just step away from the screen. Step away from any screen and just sit there and look at a flower or look outside. Just stop. Even like a minute pause can help you get a sense of what's next or what's right for you now.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another question we had was, how can someone transition from the work mentality to include creativity and not feel guilty and begin to really value being creative? So it's kind of like stepping away from that I am what I do kind of a thing and starting to find the value and not feeling guilty about just being inherently creative. How do you coach people down that path?
That. That's a great question, and I coach a lot of professional writers who want to write something for themselves, and they have a really hard time because they're used to writing for a paycheck. And
yeah, right.
So you've got to be a value hound. You've got to be looking for the value in your own creative process. A lot of what we're going to create is not going to hit the world for a long time. It took me 13 years to get my novel out. So there was no value in that other than what I gleaned from it. So one thing we do in our free writing is at the end of the free write, I ask people to write 3 words that describe how that was for them. And so it's just a little awareness practice of what actually it feels like to have just spent 15 minutes writing. And they notice things, and so they collect that list over the month.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the month, they see this great range of what they have gotten from their own creative process. And often it's, as much as it can be from I'm so happy to I'm so grumpy. It's a range. It's not all, rainbows, but some kind of awareness practice like that, the 3 words, or even just stopping at the end of a session like when I first started writing back in the day and then walking down the street feeling good and saying, I want more of that.
Yeah.
So you've got to develop your own awareness of the value that you personally get from your own creative act and build from there.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something you really instilled in me a couple years ago when we worked together, was that writing is a real keystone habit for me because it fuels everything else. It fuels my spoken word. It fuels the quality of my work, the quality of my music. It all begins with writing on some level. Blank page, put some stuff on it kind of thing. And, another person asked about, how do you justify being creative when you have to be spending time finding a job? So like it's this idea of guilt again that, the creativity is pulling you away from what you should be doing, when what we're, I think, advocating here is that you're essentially here to create, and you have to look at the job that you would want to get or the type of work you want to be doing as all benefiting from this act of writing, this act of creating. Do you believe that, Cynthia?
Well, that's true, and that's exactly what you were saying too earlier about, the busier I get, the more I need to meditate.
Yeah, it's true.
The more
it's counterintuitive.
I do think that looking for a job and trying to survive and then trying to create at the same time, I do think that's very difficult. I think it's really hard to feel like you can access your creative energy when your survival's at stake. I mean, those are just basic survival instincts on a deep level. But I think you also have to look at, why do you want to create? What's important to you? And who are you? Who are you in this world? What are you about?
Yeah.
I finally figured out what my life purpose is, and my life purpose is to love what I love and to share my love and to inspire other people to love what they love. So
Ooh,
love.
that's
Like,
good.
what love?
Can I
That's
steal
it.
that? Can I steal that and make my life purpose? Would you be cool with that if I stole it?
Well, I stole some of your lens statements, so you can steal
Oh,
them
cool,
too.
perfect. Yeah, it's a lending library.
Fully expect things to work out.
Yeah, that's a
What?
good one.
But so go to your original impulse. Go to your lens statement. Go to
Yeah,
your why, and
your
look at,
true north. Yeah.
okay, yeah. So when I think about when I'm drawing or painting, I'm doing that because I love it. It's just fun, and